So there are really two issues on finance which are really making headlines this week. So the first is around the establishment of a new global climate fund, and the second is around whether or not developed countries will be able to show that they've delivered on the financing commitments they made in the short term back in Copenhagen. So the big issues on the establishment of a fund is that we want to make sure that this time this fund will really deliver for the adaptation needs of the poorest people. So our experience, and we've just published a new report which shows that all of the existing flows of climate finance are tending to go towards bigger emerging economies, and they're going for mitigation. So we want to make sure that this new fund really delivers, has a guaranteed amount which goes to adaptation in the poorest countries. So that's a really important issue which Oxfam is campaigning on this week. On the Fast Start finance, this was the money which rich countries pledged in Copenhagen. They pledged $30 billion over 3 years between 2010 and 2012. And of course, developing countries are now starting to ask rich countries, where's the money? How can you show us that it's really been delivered, that you kept your promise? So one of the really critical things that we need to see between now and Cancun at the end of this year is that rich countries can show that the money which they put on the table really is new money. And the way they can do that is by demonstrating that it's new against a fair, common baseline. So this means that they need to be able to show that their money is in addition to the promises which they made in the past on development aid. So it's in addition to money for schools and hospitals in poor countries. This is new money which wouldn't have flown otherwise to help developing countries both to develop in a low carbon way and to adapt to the challenges of climate change. This really has become a big fight in the negotiations this week, and we saw developing countries starting to ask developed countries in the negotiations, where's the money, how can you show us that it's really been delivered, and how can you show us that this is new money? So this is going to be a big fight over the weeks to come, whether or not rich countries are able to demonstrate that the money that they've put on the table really is new money, that they haven't just diverted resources which were already promised and relabeled them as climate finance. So Oxfam have been campaigning for some years to find new sources of the money. So these would be sources which wouldn't come from taxpayers in rich countries who are already squeezed by the economic crisis. So they're things like a tax or an emissions trading scheme which would raise money from international transport, or a financial transactions tax, for example, which would tax the banks for all of the money that they make by trading different commodities. So on the first of those, there's been some big discussions this week about whether or not we can impose fair measures to cap emissions from international shipping, but do it in a way which would also raise finance. So this is a big discussion because this sector so far hasn't had any measures to control its emissions under the Kyoto Protocol. So there's a big push to find some measures which can control the rising emissions from international shipping. But for Oxfam, we're really clear. We want to do that in a way which can also raise finance. So by imposing, for example, a tax on international shipping, not only can we control the rise in the emissions, but we can also generate substantial new and additional finance which we can direct to poor countries to help them to adapt. And that's money which hasn't already been promised by rich countries, and it's money which wouldn't have to come from taxpayers in the north.